Thank you for watching Web3TV. I'm Nicole, and today I have my guest is one of the few other women in the space. Her name is Leah, also known as Girl Gone Crypto. Hi, Leah.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so as you know, I started something last week called Crypto Loveline. We had one of the guys on. I'm hoping that more guys will come on as time goes on, but actually thought after talking with him for that hour that it would be really good idea to get another woman who works in blockchain on that topic and what we can do to help the space, to help the guys in the space, and ultimately to help ourselves.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. When I heard that you started that series, I was like, oh, that's going to be such a hit. That's going to be so much fun. So I'm excited to dig into it and chat about all that.
Well, that assumes that the crypto bros don't completely tear me apart. So
Always a possibility, right? Anytime you talk about like relationship advice or things like that, there'll be people that agree and disagree. So I guess that's probably part of it.
For sure. Yeah. We'll see. I'm enthusiastic, but cautiously. All right. So I made a PowerPoint.
Whoa, you're so fancy.
Well, just to help organize the thoughts, So I'm going to share it, okay?
Let's do it.
Crypto Loveline, how women in crypto can help our crypto bros and the blockchain ecosystem.
Love it.
Okay. So, and I'm hoping that you can weigh in here too, because these are just my ideas.
Sure.
And I'm sure that you have other ideas that we can add to this.
Perfect. Let's see what happens.
Okay. So why should we even care? Well, it could be exhausting to live in such a male-dominated space. A lack of women slows the adoption rate and stifles innovation. And the guys won't shut up about it.
That's an interesting point. I actually, like, as a woman in the space, I feel like that's kind of like a dangerous topic to even broach, right? Because you get people from all sides of things that are like, oh, don't talk about this or talk about this. And, kind of like you were talking earlier about how, like, hope I don't get picked apart. But what I think is really interesting about attracting more women into the space is, not to sound stereotypical, but I think, are just kind of more social creatures. And so when we like something and we're excited about something, the likelihood that we're going to tell all of our friends is probably a little bit higher, right, than maybe some dudes hanging out. And so I think that, as we're looking at adoption, having women in the space can be, great for helping to kind of help that word spread a little bit faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really, a lot of people in the space will say, like, well, we shouldn't be focusing on gender. Blockchain is gender agnostic. Blockchain isn't a gender issue. And that's certainly true because blockchains don't care whether you're male or female or what gender you are, but failing to acknowledge that the space is primarily male is also a problem.
Yeah, and I don't know that people are not acknowledging that. Like, I feel like most people are like, that's fairly, I don't want to say like common knowledge, but I do kind of feel like most people are aware that that's something that's growing. I do think that it's improving. We're seeing more, we met at World CryptoCon, right? And I feel like conferences are starting to really say, hey, how can we make sure that we have more female speakers? Because it's not that the women aren't out there in the space. There's a lot of really intelligent, awesome, smart women that are, running different projects or are, in different levels of leadership within different blockchain companies. And so I think it's cool to see that kind of shift in even the culture of events where they're kind of highlighting that, yes, we are bringing in a lot of female speakers here as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree. I guess what I mean is not failing to acknowledge that there is a gender ratio imbalance, because that's certainly true. And you're right. That's not something that anybody is denying. What I mean is, I guess, failing to acknowledge that it's a problem. And I definitely think you're right, because things have changed radically in, the time that I've been involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that, as more women enter the space, that helps the entire space out, right? Like we talk about diversity is kind of a hot word, right? But generally speaking, when you do have teams and in different, even in the community in general, different life experiences, different perspectives. It makes the whole team stronger. So
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not really just we care because we don't want to be outnumbered. It's we care because that's what's best for the space that we live in, work in, want to see as part of our future.
Yeah, one thing that I think is nice is, I don't know if this is something you've experienced, but I feel like a certain like sisterhood with a lot of the other like ladies that are in the space, and that's really fun. Like I love that we have so many like really strong, amazing women that are in the space, and yeah, I'm just excited for that sisterhood to grow even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely do kind of like immediately flock to each other at conferences. It's even funny, like at the World CryptoCon, I don't know, it was a networking party. I think it was like the opening night. And it was funny, there were like women on one side of the room by ourselves. And then like the rest of the place was like totally filled with guys. And it was funny.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't notice that. I must have, but I was hanging out by the bar, so that attracted both men and women.
Yeah. That was like the spot to be, right?
Right.
All right. So I'm thinking like, what can we do to help these crypto bros? So like both to bring more women into the space and to help our crypto fam, to help our brothers in cryptocurrency.
Yeah. So what can we do? Is that the
Yeah. So I
question?
have 3 ideas and I'm
Ooh,
hoping that
okay.
you can add.
Yeah, bring it.
So one is to create educational content to bring more people into crypto.
That's me.
That's you, yeah. Yeah, and I think we're doing that, right? I mean, evidence.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Idea number 2 is to tell our female friends that there are lots of like cute, nice single guys in cryptocurrency.
Oh, that's so fun. I love it.
And then my last point, and then my PowerPoint, is to help them. So we can't really tell our friends that there are like nice guys in crypto if the guys are not nice, right? Like we don't want to lie to our friends.
Yeah, I like your points. I think those are really fun. Definitely education is key, right? Like taking things that, at least what I like to think about when I'm making content is like what feels kind of intimidating to me. And I'm already, a few years deep into the crypto space. I'm like, if it's intimidating to me, it's definitely going to be something that like my friends would have questions about. So try to keep that kind of end user, that person in mind. But yeah, in terms of like the cute single guys, it's true. There's a lot of great guys in the world of crypto. I've met so many just really cool people that, yes, they are single. So ladies, come on over to the dark side. Come on over to crypto.
The question though is, how many friends do you have at this point? And maybe your answer is going to stack, like just blow me away, but how many friends do you have who you talk to regularly aren't in crypto?
I would say that I still have a pretty good amount. Like we talk about crypto, but what I think is someone has to have an actual reason that it's in their life. Like just saying, oh, this is a cool thing, I might buy some, it is not really like that compelling of a reason. And so like for me anyway, what kind of drew me into the space was I found myself in a situation where I had some crypto, and then I was like, oh, like what is this? Where did this come from? How does this work? What do I do with it? And that kind of catapulted my whole learning experience, which comes back to those educational videos you talked about, looking those up and trying to figure out what to do. But I think that unless there's like really like it's a part of their life or they own some, then it's going to remain something that they're just maybe curious about, or they're like, oh yeah, that's that thing Leah does. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that I always try to kind of think about when I'm looking at different projects that are in the space is I get really excited by projects that are kind of like the lowest common denominator in terms of like, hey, this is really easy for someone to use and it's something that could be kind of fun. And so like a project that I really love is Lolli, because like anyone could use it. I don't know if you're familiar with the browser plugin Lolli, but
A little bit from your posts,
oh,
but
okay.
not like I've never used it myself.
Yeah, so it's just a browser plugin. Like you've probably seen those like cashback, different sites. And so this one though, you earn Bitcoin. And what I like about that is it's not saying, hey, go invest your hard-earned money in Bitcoin, which can be a little bit scary for some people. But literally just by like shopping, they start to earn it. And I think that's really fun because then I think they're like, oh wow, I have $100 worth of Bitcoin. Like now what? So they feel more invested. So that's probably one of my favorite ways. If we're talking about not just drawing in general users, but drawing in females and like specifically like my female friends, they all shop online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of, I think, an easy entry point that doesn't require a lot of understanding until they decide they want to ask more questions and go a little bit deeper now that they own some.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Ken told me about something that his mom uses, and I'm gonna have to go back and look at what it is, but it's like she puts in that she wants, 20% off of something on Amazon, and then they say, okay, but we want the payment in Bitcoin.
Oh, I've heard of that. I don't remember the name of it either, but yes, I've heard of that. And that's pretty cool too.
But no, I think that that's a great suggestion. So things that people can do to earn Bitcoin without actually going and buying Bitcoin.
Right. Because I think it's more than just the like, okay, I'm going to go spend money on Bitcoin. But we talk about that intimidation factor a little bit of like, okay, so it's not like I can, now I've got to go figure out how to send my money to something called an exchange. And now I need to figure that out. And so there's a couple of steps, where that's what I like about, things that people can kind of easily get that entry point in without having to learn a ton of hoops and ropes.
Yeah. All right. So actually, and I probably should have asked this sooner, but what got you into cryptocurrency? So you've been in for a few years. I've been in for a few years, and like, particularly, that's weird. So what happened?
Yeah, so I have kind of a funny entry story, but are you familiar with the website Steemit, like a blogging website?
Yes.
Okay, so I found that in kind of like, I want to say early, maybe mid 2017. And I just kind of stumbled across it and I decided I like doing different music covers. Not that I'm any good, but I just have fun with it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to make a ukulele cover and post it on this website and see what happens. And then I couldn't believe it. It made like, I think like $100 or something. And so then I was like, whoa, what is this? This is crazy, And so I started posting like really regularly on there. And so it's been really fun to be part of that community the last few years. But that's kind of what I would say got me in. Because then I was like, okay, I've got this like, $100 or whatever of crypto. And then the more I posted, the more I was earning. And it kind of forced me to learn more about it. Cause I would be telling my friends, I'm like, I'm doing this thing. It's so crazy. And like, they would have questions too. Like, well, where does that money even come from? Like, what do you mean it's just digital? What is that? And so I had to not only learn for myself to answer my own questions, but figure out how to explain it to all of my friends that I was like excitedly telling about this. So I think that is, that's what's kind of fun, right? Is it was an easy entry point. I just stumbled across it and then haven't really left the rabbit hole since.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like that, right? Like, yeah, once you start falling down the rabbit hole, it can be kind of hard to pull yourself out.
In a good way though, right?
Yeah, of course, of course, of course. Yeah. Okay. So I think, I mean, yeah, I'm hoping that you can have, more ideas. I think that that's a great one. And that's sort of how you got involved with cryptocurrency, was that you started earning some and,
Mm-hmm.
and then you started supporting Lolli, which helps people earn crypto without having to go buy it.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I just think that's kind of an easy entry point. So that's kind of why I like bringing them up so often, because I'm just excited about that. But yeah, I think that there's the more we can see projects like that just make crypto fun for kind of everyday users. Like I don't know, like exactly what that looks like, but just making it less intimidating and less technical feeling, and brings more of that like fun kind of community feeling to it, you know?
Yeah, and it definitely is a community. I mean, like, I know crypto is kind of like weirdly its own world. We have our own celebrities. And like, I mean, I was in Toronto and we were, I don't know, going somewhere. It was with the crypto community, of course, because I live there and essentially don't know anybody who isn't
I love it.
who isn't somehow involved in cryptocurrency, because I've like chatted them up by now about it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But we were going upstairs and like saw the rapper Drake, and I honestly like had no idea who that was. Like, what? And like, and I think that's because there are people who most of my friends would never recognize, but I would.
Right.
So it's a community.
And a rabbit hole at the same time, right? But no, it's so true. Like sometimes I'll have friends that are like, did you hear about this thing in the news? And I was like, oh no, I guess I've been just wrapped up in crypto Twitter and I'm just getting my news there. You know what I mean? Or I'll say something where I'm just assuming like, oh yeah, this thing, you know, like whether it's, I don't know, like people like running the ATMs in Hong Kong or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, did you guys hear about this? And they're kind of like, what? No, like if it doesn't make super mainstream news, they haven't. Where I'm a little bit like maybe down in the weeds a little more on the kind of stuff that different, you know, crypto or like liberty minded or whatever people are sharing. So yeah, it is easy to kind of get into little silos and think that, you know, and forget that there's tons else happening around outside of our own areas.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, and there's stuff happening that's important that's going to impact the future freedom of people and not just their financial freedom. So people who aren't necessarily paying tons of attention to crypto or to blockchain, not saying that everybody should drop everything else in their lives like we have
Right.
and pursue it, but that totally ignoring it can also like potentially negatively impact your future.
And that's an interesting point, because I try to have some of those conversations with my friends, like, you know, the ones that aren't really into crypto yet, right? Is just talking about with them. I'm like, you know, hey, I'm not a financial advisor. Don't necessarily take it from me. But if you even put like 5% of your portfolio into Bitcoin, like I think you'll be a happy camper in 5 years from now. You know what I mean? And so just even like having those conversations, not necessarily like, hey, you don't have to be crazy like me and go like all in on, you know, on crypto, but even just thinking about like adding a small percentage to your portfolio, which actually even opens up a wider conversation of, you know, we're talking about mass adoption and like there's all these different dApps and projects and things that can help with that. But honestly, I'm like, wow, if every financial advisor started advising that their clients put like 1% in Bitcoin, like we would have mass adoption. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, so obviously, you know, telling people that they should consider or research for themselves at least what could happen for them financially if they buy Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, that's one thing. But I mean, like, there could be far-reaching impacts on not knowing what a blockchain is in 5 years from now that don't have anything to do with how much money is in or how much purchasing power someone has. Like there are I don't know, ideological shifts that go along with the adoption of cryptocurrency that I think are kind of important.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting point. And I think that, you know, people that are taking the time to educate themselves now are really setting themselves up for future success. Like you said, not just from, you know, a financial standpoint, but from even just being kind of prepared from an ideological standpoint to be part of what's happening in the next wave of things. Because that is one thing that I love about cryptocurrency is I feel like it lines up with my values in a lot of ways. And that's a huge part of why I'm excited about it. And that's part of why I'm excited to like be in the space and helping it progress and help it to grow, because the world that I see cryptocurrency fitting in is more in line with the world that I want to live in, you know? And so I do think that, I mean, social change takes time, but I mean, look at like organic food, for example. Like 15 years ago, you could probably only find it in like a specialty grocery store. And now Walmart sells organic food. So it might seem like things take a long time, but sometimes they the curve of adoption, once you hit a certain threshold, can go pretty quickly. So I'm excited to see some of those kind of social changes happen too.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% of the reason, well, I don't know, I don't want to say 100% because
It's
that's
a big
probably a
commitment.
lie, but a huge contributing factor to my investing my money and time into cryptocurrency was that, I've kind of always known that the system was broken, but never really been given an alternative. And then sort of learning what the alternative was with cryptocurrency and thinking about that on a meta level and not just seeing the economics of it, that was absolutely a really important part of why I decided that I wanted to be involved and that I wanted to own some.
Yeah. And I think that more and more people are starting to kind of wake up to how broken our system really is. I mean, we back in '08, we bailed out, like all of these banks, printed all of this money. And, it's funny how quickly people forget that. But, I think that more and more people are starting to notice like, hey, wait a second, like there's maybe issues with our monetary policy. And not saying it's everyone on the street, a lot of people probably don't even know what the word fiat means. But, I do think that more people are becoming aware, even just of the value of the US dollar, that it's not actually backed by anything. It's just kind of backed by a hope and a prayer, in the sense that we all accept it to be currency. But yeah, I am excited to see more people start to, I think that's almost a first step, is waking up to the fact that our financial system is actually in trouble and has issues. And even though it's not like it's going to suddenly crash and burn overnight, like I think that as more people become aware, then they start to, things like cryptocurrency start becoming more attractive because they're seeing other options out there.
Yeah, well, and it's not just our financial system that's broken, right? I mean, like, probably our financial system being broken contributes to other systems being broken, but it's stuff like, our education system is broken because the people who write or not all of the people, but some of the people who contribute to what has to be taught in primary and secondary schools are also funding the broken system. So, I mean, it is all tied to the economy, but there are definitely like systemic changes that are indirectly related to economy, right? And so one of them, you were housed with Lynn Ulbricht at WCC. Yeah, and so one of those systems that's really broken is our justice system.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Just hearing, I mean, I'm assuming a lot of people listening to this are familiar with the Ross case. But when her and I had a chance to sit down and chat, she literally went into session like, this is how it violated the First Amendment and the Fourth and the Fifth. And I think it was the Sixth and the Eighth. I forget exactly which ones, but she was just going down a line of, things that we're supposed to be protected against or protected from here in the US. And so what I always like say to people when I'm talking to them about the Ross case, some of these same friends that aren't quite totally into Bitcoin yet, they're like, well, what's the, yeah, did he deserve it? They kind of like, they don't really get it. And I'm like, no, like if this can happen to Ross, this could happen to anyone. I'm not saying that Ross didn't, there are certain things that he did that, he won't say he's 100% like everything's always where it is, but he built a website, and the people that actually were selling the drugs are like out of jail already, and like how messed up is that, right? And so the fact that I think the main point that I try to kind of get across to people when I'm talking about his case and the ramifications that it has on our liberties is that they wanted to make an example of him. And they even said that in the court hearing. And that's what scares me, because if they can just decide that they're going to give a horrible punishment because they want to make an example, like that's not supposed to happen, That's not supposed to happen here in the US. So,
well, for me, I agree with you, like, but it's beyond that, where it's that he had created the marketplace because he wanted people to be able to freely buy and sell goods that shouldn't be illegal for anybody to choose what they want to put into their own bodies. And then I start to ask questions like, well, why is it illegal? And, there are all kinds of theories, and one of them is that drugs lead to mind expansion, and the powers that be don't want you to break out of the matrix. And another one is that that it's because they figured out how to monetize the tobacco and alcohol industries, and they didn't figure out how to monetize some of these other substances. And that goes back again to not only is our judiciary system broken, but our financial system.
We have a lot of broken systems. We could probably dig into any major institutional system and find a lot of brokenness.
Yeah, and so there's this thing like so eventually like this always happens in the evolution of humanity. There's a system that's broken, and the people eventually rise up and revolt and overthrow that system, and then essentially take the place of that system. So that's a question that maybe we should talk about for a few minutes, is like, what are we going to do so that we're different? So we're not just repeating the problems of history, so we don't just become that broken system that we, rose up and tried to overthrow.
I think that this is kind of where enterprise blockchain becomes interesting to me, because, a lot of these huge companies, like I was just in Seattle for a crypto event, and the head of the Amazon blockchain group was there, IBM, Samsung, like a lot of these people that are helping to develop blockchain strategy for these huge companies. It's interesting to see their kind of take on things, because what they're looking to implement a lot of the time, I would say, isn't truly decentralized, but it's maybe a step closer, and it's a step in the right direction. And so what I think is kind of interesting, and, kind of back to your question about, what can we do that's different? I think that creating solutions that are better, so that eventually, kind of these bigger powers that be have to say, okay, like Facebook, let's say, stealing our data, taking our information. I think that eventually I'm hopeful that we will be at a point in our society where we actually do own our data. And because I think it's more valuable than oil, like our data, people don't even realize like how much money is created from that. Like Facebook is a $570 billion company, and they don't sell anything. They sell ads to you,
Yeah.
And so what I am hoping is that we can have a more like less of a revolution, and more of a peaceful, like, hey, this is a better solution, and eventually that they can't really ignore that. And people actually say, hey, this matters to me, and companies have to listen.
So what about when something comes along that says that to us?
That says what to us?
Hey, this is a better solution than blockchain. We should work together and build, like, what's going to happen, and how do you see the blockchain community sort of responding to that? Do you see that being different than what's going on right now?
That's an interesting question. I think it would depend on what it is. Like if it was something that was also peer-to-peer and also trustless, I think that could be something the community would consider maybe. But I think that if it would have to kind of line up with those same values of Bitcoin in order for it to be something that people could consider. Because I would hope that as a society we continue to progress and develop new things. Like there's how many blockchains are there that are faster than Bitcoin, right? Out there, most of them. And but are they as completely and fully decentralized as Bitcoin? No. So I do think we're going to have this kind of gray area of different ends of the spectrum of things going on. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how the space plays out. But I do think we'll see lots of innovations and different things kind of coming to market.
So do you see blockchain eventually being replaced?
I don't know if you can. I mean, the only way it would be replaced, I guess, is if people just didn't use it because there was something else. But just in its core of how it works, it's one of the most, I think, innovative technologies that has been invented in a really long time. And so to think that that could be dethroned, if you will, by something better, I just don't know what that thing would be. So it's hard for me to, I don't know. It's hard for me to answer really.
Maybe someday.
Well, you never know, right? Like I said, we're always progressing. Like an example I kind of think of is, I forget the name of who it was, but for like decades, no one had ever run a 4-minute mile. And then once someone actually broke that record, I think within the next year, like 35 more people ran a 4-minute mile. So sometimes it's that like, okay, we did this thing. And then by seeing someone else do it, it kind of pushes us forward. So who knows what will happen. But, like I said, I think that it would have to be something that has the same values that we all hold so dearly here in the crypto community.
All right. Well, thank you. Okay, so what have I not asked you, or what else, I don't know, would you like to share with the audience?
I just want to say thanks for having me. This has been a really fun conversation. I feel like we've covered a ton of really great different topics. And I would just maybe come back to what we talked about in the beginning about talking to your friends about crypto, talking to your family, like take Bitcoin with you to Thanksgiving dinner. It's part of, I think, mass adoption is, we talked about educational materials and all these different things, but I think even just everyday conversations can be really impactful on that. And so, yeah, just remember to bring that up in your conversations. And I think eventually, research shows that someone has to hear something at least 7 times before it starts to stick. So even if it feels like maybe you're not really getting anywhere, I do think that those conversations, they do compound. And I think that they do make a bit of an impact and a difference.
Well, yeah, and particularly because people have generally a negative perception of Bitcoin because of the way that the mainstream media covers it. So it's not just that they have to hear about it 7 times, it's that there have to be, forget what that number is, but it's like you have to hear something positive, I don't know, 15 positive comments for every negative comment that you hear. So imagine how many times you have to hear
Right.
someone speak positively about Bitcoin to overcome the hurdle that because you probably heard about it, friends, family have lost tons of money because they bought in the winter of 2017.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm sure that last year Thanksgiving was a bit of a bloodbath when everyone, had to go back to Thanksgiving dinner. But I think, we're starting to be on the up. And so I think this year people are going to be pretty open to having some conversations again.
I'm definitely really excited about the differences that I've seen in cryptocurrency now versus what I was seeing in that bubble of 2017, because at that time there were people building, but there was a lot of Lambo buying.
I agree. I feel like the ICO bubble was like such a bummer that happened to the space, because I think that actually set us back quite a bit in
Oh, a
terms of
ton.
public perception and even regulators being, jumping in to create favorable regulations for people in the US about crypto, because they view crypto as a fraud, because there were a lot of fraudulent things going on in ICOs and people just jumping on the bandwagon being like, well, if it says crypto, you'll make money. And I think that really harmed the space from a perception standpoint. So I'm glad that I feel like we've kind of outgrown that, hopefully. And, I think that people are a little bit wiser and smarter right now in the space and are really kind of doing more of their due diligence on projects. You can't just create a token and get rich, people are really looking at the product itself and the use case. So yeah, I'm definitely excited. I feel like crypto's changed a lot in
And
that
there's been so
sense.
much more humility this time. I feel like it's been
Mm.
good. I mean, we also haven't seen the price go from $1,000 to $20,000 in 6 months. That was a little bit crazy. I mean, like, just objectively, how could you have expected the community to behave better? That was a little nuts.
Yeah.
All right. So, where can people find you on social media if they want to come follow you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much hanging out wherever people are hanging online. So you can find my YouTube channel if you just type in Girl Gone Crypto, I'll pop up. And same with Twitter, Instagram. You can always find me. I mentioned Steam earlier. I'm still posting on Steam, and I'm even on TikTok these days, making a total fool of myself, making little videos. So just type in Girl Gone Crypto, you'll find me.
All right. Well, yeah, you need to teach me how to not be afraid of making a fool of myself, because like when I watch your videos I'm like, oh, she's so cute, and I never think that, but then like when I'm making my own I'm like, I'm such a you know?
You know what I find is people like to see other people's weird and crazy. Like they dig it. And so even though like I even posted something yesterday that I was like, oh, that's kind of embarrassing. But you know, it's like gotten so many retweets, right? So I think that people just like it when they see other people being vulnerable, you know, a little bit and just being a little bit weird. So I try to just, you know, close my eyes and hit publish and see what happens.
That I love crypto because it's such a weird space. And with that, thank you so much for being here, Leah. I'm Nicole. You're watching Web3 TV, and we'll be right back.